Saludos everybody, welcome back to Decent Shirt, where we play cards while we wear decent shirts. And for today's video, I know I've been away for a while now. I know I promised a certain video that I haven't uploaded just yet. However, a lot of things have been happening, but that's not what you're here for. You saw the thumbnail, you know what we're here for. The world of Elestrals has been put upside down. Everything has changed, for we have a new ban list, and this time it came with vengeance. Let's talk about it. Okay, I'm gonna try something new for this video. I'm just gonna talk to you in the camera. Probably gonna be editing many clips because I rant a lot. Anyhow, let's just get on to it. So we just got a new ban list. Originally we only had Spark It, which was banned. And with that news, we also were revealed the fact that we would be getting a new Spark It. One with a title that would say Escape from Tartarus. And so I think that most people were agreed with this ban. We thought it was a problem, and we saw the metagame develop throughout the months that followed. And for whatever reason, it seemed like it took a turn for the worse. I do think that the ban on Spark It was warranted. It's just that the consequences of that ban warranted more bans and more limitations. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But essentially, people overall took it the good way. Right? I think that most people took it like, yeah, it was a necessary evil. We wanted to avoid banning cards, but here we are, and it was necessary. And we're going to see that a lot of the base set cards are a little bit troublesome. But anyhow, so today on September 24th of 2024, Dan A Drive just posted a new video basically throwing out the massive news that we got more cards sent to Tartarus. And the first victim that I think needs to be talked about is none other than the good old fruit dragon DRATAYA. Let's give a moment of silence to our fallen comrade. Oh, anyhow. DRATAYA got banned, which means that we are no longer able to play with that card, and it also means that we're gonna get a new printing of DRATAYA further on. We don't know yet when, but it has a very interesting effect, which I'm gonna pop in the screen right now, and I think it's a solid effect. I think that it's going to work. Maybe it's still in development, but I think that the effect that they showed is a really solid effect that I know that not a lot of people are going to be super happy with, but it's the essence of DRATAYA, and I'm happy that that's what we're going for. Essentially, it says that you can discard either an Ambrosia or a Golden Apple of Discord. If you do, you draw 2 cards. It's a UCAN effect, so it's only once per turn, a soft once per turn. But basically, it makes it so that you're not gonna be able to realistically use DRATAYA more than once in a game, or more than once in a turn, unless you have multiple of them, in which case you're still discarding. You really don't want to be discarding Ambrosia, so this is like a heavy cost to pay for a draw engine. It has synergy still with the fruit deck, so it's still viable. It's still a card that you can definitely use. However, it's definitely not going to be as powerful as it used to be. And we are all clear on this. We understand that DRATAYA was broken, unfortunately so. And that's like a trend that we're seeing with a lot of base set cards. That unfortunately, we have no way of knowing. Like, as much as I would like Dan to be a perfect, and in 2020 hindsight, right? Like, hindsight You kind of see it obvious now, but back then we only had one Ambrosia. So who would have thought that we would get titled versions of Ambrosia so that you could draw potentially 6 times in a single turn? Now that would be, it was very different in base set how the landscape looked, and now that we're currently in the third set, moving on to our fourth set, um, it's understandable that certain cards just weren't future proofed, I guess, right? It worked for that moment. It made the fruit deck a viable deck, a rogue deck. It wasn't even like a broken deck. And technically, even in Frostfall, it was a solid deck. I still consider it a little bit unfair, but um, but it was a solid deck, right? Not the top deck either, just a solid deck. But then we got to Daybreak, and the tools that we got from Daybreak kind of broke the engine, the draw engine that we had with DRATAYA. And unfortunately, we got to this point where we had to ban DRATAYA. I know a lot of people are not gonna be happy. I know a friend of mine, Red Sun, is not gonna be happy about that. But it's a lot of people's favorite card. I understand it. It's one of the cards that got people into the game. And I remember in my demo night, which uh, I did in August, that one of the decks that I was using to teach people how to play the game and the mechanics and everything was the fruit deck. It is one of those fan favorite cards, so obviously it does sting. I know a lot of people are not happy about it. You just see the comment section in the video, and you know that it's not a 100% consensus happy, and that was never going to happen. But I do think that looking at it from an angle, I think it's necessary, it's warranted. DRATAYA, if not through Waspire, it was going to break something else, because drawing that many cards and healing at the same time is just too good. It's unfair. You're playing basically a different game, and that's the same thing that I would talk with Redstone about it. Like when we talk about, and he always played DRATAYA. That was his deck. Now he's using other decks, but throughout all the year that we've been playing Elestrals, he only played DRATAYA Burn, and the reason for it is because it played differently to everything else. He was just drawing in steroids, basically. And while I was drawing like 1 or 2 cards per turn. So again, I think it was warranted. If you look at the video that Dan makes reference to regarding the combo of DRATAYA ban, not DRATAYA ban, the DRATAYA Waspire, it was definitely warranted. Like, that deck is too consistent for and too degenerate, honestly. Like, we should never have an FTK, especially an FTK where you can do it before your opponent can even play their turn. That's impossible. We should not have that in the game. And I know a lot of people don't see it right now, but it would have honestly deterred a lot of people that are entering into the game, and a lot of people would have left. So honestly, I agree with this ban. It sucks. DRATAYA was also a fan favorite. I have so many stellars of DRATAYA. I have so many versions of DRATAYA. I enjoyed using DRATAYA's engine in a lot of decks. Unfortunately, it was a necessary evil. Now, let's go on to the second card that was hit. I think the second impactful card that we saw was Lavalith, which hasn't been here all that long, only since Frostfall back in summer. But Lavalith just made a huge impact. We all knew the moment that it was revealed that it was going to be probably the best card out of that set, and it certainly was. Like, in a set where, and in a game where most cards don't even get to $10. Like, if anything, it was Gorgon's case that got to $10, but most cards were so accessible that you really didn't pay that much. But Lavalith, I got to see Lavalith in $25, $30. People were actually buying it for that price, and it's not that I'm against it. I mean, I did it myself because I did need my extra copies of Lavalith, and I was not very lucky out of the 4 boxes that I opened. Anyhow, but moving forward, Lavalith was like that one card that a lot of people were paying the heavy price to pay for it, to play it. And even that is still cheap compared to other games. I'm talking about Yu-Gi-Oh players, you know what I mean. Heck, even Pokemon players. And Magic, we don't even get me started there. Anyhow, I'm ranting. Going back to Lobolith. Lobolith was a really oppressive card. It was obviously something that Fire was looking for, and it actually made Fire a lot playable. But unfortunately, since it was so splashable, it was found its way into decks that didn't even play Fire and only play Fire because of Lobolith. And the main enabler, or the main, let's say, culprit for this was definitely Five Guys. Fives was just too strong and would just be able to cast it as a way to come back. And what was originally envisioned to power up Fire, which it did, also powered up basically every other deck that could play the Fire, and that was basically every other deck. Like, I saw at certain points even Thunder play Lobolith because it was just that good of a card. Luckily, it wasn't banned. It wasn't sent to Tartarus, so that's good. What it did happen to it is that we got limited, and that's where we want to talk about that topic. We have a limited list. If you're not familiar with TCGs, then you might not know that certain TCGs, such as Yu-Gi-Oh, or even Dragon Ball Super, I think is another one that has it. You have certain cards that are banned. That means you can't play them in official tournaments. But we also have limited, semi-limited lists. Limited basically means that you can only play one copy in the deck. And semi-limited, basically, as you can assume, it means that you can only play two. Yeah. Basically, a lot of people are a little bit on the fence with limited, and I get it, because limited doesn't always solve the problem. If anything, it just makes it feel worse if their opponent was able to draw into it. I can already tell you from testing, yes, because today I've already started testing against people post Banlist, that one Lobolith, if they do get it, it's like, really you drew into the Lobolith that you needed to win the game? It's insane. But sometimes it's been like that. However, it also helps to not completely invalidate those people that bought the Lobolith. I know that some people were already complaining that they bought a playset of Lobolith and they paid X amount of money for them and all that, yada yada yada. That's always gonna happen. That always happens with a ban list. Unfortunately, that's how it goes. But at the very least, it's still a playable card. It's not like DRATAYA that you basically say goodbye to that engine, goodbye to that card. Lobolith, on the other hand, is a card that basically you can say, oh yeah, at the very least I can play one, and it means that Fire can still use it. It also means that if you really want to use it, then you can just splash the two Fire Spirits. But that's where it gets interesting, because are you really going to put two Fire Spirits just for one card out of your 40 card deck? I'm thinking most people are probably not going to go for that option. And that's where it becomes a lot more interesting. So, Lobolith was a problematic card, specifically not because it would hit runes or back rows, but rather because it punished you for playing a mechanic of the game, which is the Divine Runes, right? It basically forced the metagame to not even consider playing Divine Runes throughout these months. Everything was dominated by Five Guys or Earth Beaters that did play the meter, but if you saw the tournaments, you would see that they would only play one or two spirits on the meter, because the point of it was just to get a quick boost and just hope, right, and make sure that Lobolith couldn't really take advantage of it. So we really did see a turn for the worse, because people weren't playing the game how I believe that it was intended, which was to play the Divine Runes, to play Ascensions. People were just not happy about casting Ascensions, which that's from base set basically, but one of the reasons was because you could get easily punished by some of the cards that are put today in the limited. Speaking of, we also had Earthquake, and we had Resting on Your Laurels. Both of these cards are also hit. We're going to talk about each of them separately as well, but These cards in tandem with Lava just made fives really, really strong. It just made it too strong because they always had outs, and their normal the idea of five guys is not centric on one or two cards, even though we see like constantly the same cards being used. It's more of the idea that I get to cast an Elestral that you have to react to, and more often than not, if you react to it, you're losing more spirits than what I'm using. So you are losing the spirit battle. And that meant that heavy healing decks tried to rise, but since those healing decks didn't have the stats to compete or make it hard for five guys, because now we had Elestrals that had essentially six attack, um, like Globalith and Mustation. Basically, it was really tough for any other deck other than five guys to compete, and that's why Demeter and Earth Beaters was the other deck that contended and was probably considered the best deck. But the idea is that it was too oppressive. It limited the options of what decks could be viable. Earthquake was basically a no restrictions removal. Yes, you had to play Earth, but most people found a way, right? You would just put 4 Earth, which wasn't too expensive, and you found a way to play the 3 Earthquakes, which is a removal without any other restriction, and that was too good because it would punish anybody that would ascend into larger or bigger Elestrals that had more than one spirit, because basically you were doing a 2-for-1. And yes, you were expending 2 Earths, but if you were beating an Elestral that had 2 or 3 spirits, then you would go even or even plus. And that was a huge issue because I believe that what Dan is trying to do is move the game towards ascensions, right? One drop decks can still be viable, but that the deck itself or the game itself moves towards ascending, because that's one of the core mechanics of the game. So because of it, Earthquake had to be hit. Not only because five guys, but also because Earth Beaters is just one of the best decks, and being able to have 3 Earthquakes at any point because they don't have to worry about how many Earth Spirits they play is something huge, honestly. Let's be real. And Earth Beaters already has enough great tools as it is. They have back row removal, they have ways to raise their stats, they have ways to special cast and go wide. Like, it was insane, right? Let's just be honest. It was insane, therefore Earthquake got hit. Let's talk about Restion Laurels. Restion Laurels is very similar to Lavalith. It's a card that punished you for playing the game, basically, for casting more than one spirit, and that is not what the game was envisioned, right? You do want to play multiple spirits. You do want to have them on board. That's the whole point of the game. Like, even like smaller bodies, you do benefit from having your Divine Rune in play or your Stadium in play. That was the whole point of the game. And Restion Laurels, while meant to be a comeback card, it was used in a very oppressive way because it would stop any strategy or would punish any strategy that wanted to play more than just 1-drops. So I do see the reason for it. I know that some people are clamoring that it maybe should have been semi-limited or just not hit at all. I personally think that this is actually good because generic removal is, I don't think it's the best for the game. I think that conditional removal is the way that we should go, because it will force your opponent to really think about deck building and also make your opponent actually work for the destruction effects that we're getting. Right now, thanks to the limitation of both Earthquake and Restion Laurels, we now have the two removal cards, in my opinion, are probably going to be PTA, because it's always been like one of those premier cards, but now even more. And also Cryoblast. I think Cryoblast is gonna be a really solid card that a lot of people are gonna want to get their hands on. It's a 1-cost rune that can basically destroy a huge amount of Elestrals already by its first effect, by being able to lower its attack, the defense. Right, if you don't know what Cryoblast is, let me put it on the screen. There we go. Cryoblast basically lowers your defense ×2 or -2, and if you reach 0 defense by the end of that turn, that Celestial is destroyed. And this has great synergy with cards like, for example, Frostmite that didn't see any play back then. Or even something like Zeus, so even Thunder can play. And look forward to that because I am going to be posting a video on my Thunder list. Anyhow, as I was saying, Resting on Your Laurels and Earthquake basically had almost no restrictions. Earthquake was no restrictions to destroy any Celestial, and Resting on Your Laurels was a generic card that didn't need you to think about what spirits you wanted to play. So back then in base set, they were solid. They were good cards that were justified back then. But now in base set, from base set and moving on to Daybreak and what goes further, these cards are considered too strong because they basically immobilize the progress of Elestrals, and it basically dictates what kind of decks can actually thrive in this format. So another card that we also should be considering is Race to the Top. Race to the Top is actually a really solid card that saw play in Thunder, but Thunder kind of lost, momentum and popularity because of the power level that it lost when it lost Spark It. I do think that Thunder is going to make a huge comeback thanks to these changes, and Race to the Top is going to be a really solid card as well. Alright, so those were the cards that were hit. I know that a lot of people are still not very happy about it. I do think that they were justified, and just playing today on this format, I felt like the format was so much healthier. I like, honestly, I really mean it. Like, it just felt like you could actually play other cards and other decks that were not just the same old five guys or one drop decks like Water Nexus and Earth Beaters. No, we actually can play Ascensions now. It meant that one of my favorite decks from Daybreak, which is the Cow deck, Soul Bell and Soul Stocks, now they can actually stay on the board, and it's a lot harder to get rid of them because you only do have one Earthquake and one Resting on Laurels if you're even deciding to run them, right? And cards like Cryoblast, which is going to be like the new premier removal, are going to have a lot of work to try to get rid of these cows and any other deck, right? That has like really solid defenses. So now Water is going to be a really hard deck to destroy with Cryoblast if you're running those defensive options and those healing options that normally do have more than 2 defense. And again, I just see this as a huge plus. I think that this is one of those changes that I think a lot of people are seeing it in a superficial level, but they're failing to see the macro, right? The whole picture. And once we get to our first tournament, I think that we're going to see a huge diversity of decks, honestly. Now, I think I've said my piece with all the cards that were hit. Decks that I think are now going to be meta. I think that are going to be meta. Definitely Thunder. I think Thunder is going to be really strong now. I think Artifacts has a really solid option, and now that they lost, right? Not that they lost, that they most of the removal and these top decks were hit. We already saw 2 of them, of the Rhino Sect artifact decks, top the last tournament. So I think that we're just going to see an increase in use of Rhino Sect, which is awesome. I love the idea behind Rhino Sect, and I hope that it becomes like a top deck, honestly. I think that Frost decks in general are going to be really strong. I think Cryovern is going to pick up and play again. So we're going to have to be looking on the lookout for that. And now Frost has Cryoblast, and it also has Brummelinks. And Brummelinks, a lot of people are not talking about it, but that card slaps. Just say it just slaps. Being able to say that Divine Root, let's put it face down, and you lose all the spirits. Oh yeah, you can't use it. Or just choosing any divine or any counter rune that is set, and you're saying, yeah, you can't use it, or you want to use it now, you go ahead, and you just proc your opponent to use their effects in a similar way to Equalinks. It just has so much value. And in certain cases, it's even better than Equalinks because you're making it so that the back row zones are now occupied and they can't use it as long as Bromelids is in play, and since we lost a lot of the removal options, Bromelids is just looking at them like, yeah. Also, Frost decks aren't affected by Cryoblast. They're Frost. So most of their Elestrals are immune basically to Cryoblast. That's a huge thing to consider, right? I think that Cryoburn and general Frost decks are gonna become really, really solid. Thunder Nexus is going, well, not Thunder Nexus, Thunder Box. I call it Thunder Box. We don't really use Nexus that much anymore. But Thunder Box is gonna be really strong. Earth Beaters is still gonna be really strong. I believe that Fire obviously got hit, but due to all the new tools that we got from artifacts, I do think that Fire can see some play. Um, Wasp Ivy is still a really solid card. I think that it's gonna see a lot more play now. Um, Fives is still a deck. It wasn't completely decimated. It just lost many of its tools, so now it's gonna have to work a little bit harder to keep up that momentum. But I am excited to see more Ascension decks pick up. I don't know what kind of Ascension decks are really going to rise, but I do think that Chronodile is going to just rise in stocks, honestly. I already had a lot of faith in the Chronodile deck. I personally like to play the Turbo version. I know that MBT and other YouTubers have been popularizing the Water Nexus build that does run the Chronodile as an alternate win condition, but I personally really like just going ham down on the Chronodile. So I think that's also going to be a really solid card and solid deck in general, whether you choose to use the Water Nexus or the Chronodile. Having said that, also Water Nexus is going to be really strong. With cards like Eddie, Curbliss, all these cards also made the deck feel a lot stronger. Um, and since this is coming on the same, like the ban list is going to be effective the 1st of October, which is the same date that the new lunar cards that were put in Shatter Stars are going to also be legal. I would say that you guys should be on the lookout for tracking. Tracking is insane, bruh. Oh my god, there's so many ways to cast that tracking. It's absolutely ridiculous. Ridiculous. Look forward to that deck profile though. Anyhow, yeah, I think those make the huge chunk of the decks that are going to see play. I do think that Bolt Tempest can see play now. I think that Centaur can also make sort of a splash, and even Pantera. I think Pantera is actually going to be very scary because you just remove Resting on Your Laurels and Earthquake from the equation of many decks, and even those decks that do have it, they're only gonna play one. That just makes Pantera really scary because it's not gonna be as easy to deal with it, and you're gonna have to rely on cards like PTA to really get rid of it more often than not, because Cryoblast is not gonna lower its defense enough, or unless you have something like a double Zeus, in which case, well, I'll give it to you. You deserve that win, or maybe something like a not Race to the Top. It's not gonna work either because its defense is too high. You would have to really come up with creative ways to try to get over said Pantera. So I think Pantera is also going to be really strong now that it has the tools of healing. I think it's going to be really solid. And in general, I just think that the format is going to be a lot healthier because we're going to see a lot more diversity in terms of the decks, which is what made me get into the game in the first place. Like, Ascensions are the big let's say attraction for this deck, for this game. So honestly, I'm happy about it. I'm excited to test more decks. I I'm gonna be testing my rogue cow deck. I am a believer. Cows are so strong. I know that Dialis, shout out to Dialis. He's also from Puerto Rico. He topped the last event with full 20 Solar Spirit deck, like a full Solar Spirit deck. That's insane. So again, there was already diversity thanks to Daybreak, but now that we're seeing it all in macro, and now we're losing some of those tools that were too oppressive, I think that this is just going to blow out, and it's just gonna do wonders for the game. So, okay, I've talked enough. I've rambled enough. I'll leave it with one question to you. This could possibly be its own video later on, but I want to ask you, what do you think is going to be the next card hit in the ban list? My money, it's probably gonna be something like Waspire or Astrabbit. Like, those cards are insane. Astrabbit is C placed in every deck. I personally wouldn't want it to be hit. I love Astrabbit. It's so cute and it's such a great card. But I can see the appeal. I can see why people would want it to be banned. Or Waspire, which is the main culprit here. Like, it's the main partner to the DRATAYA FTK. So as long as that card is legal, there are still going to be people that are going to try to break that card. Rightfully so. So which card do you guys envision being banned or hit in the ban list? Write it in the comment section below and let's have a dialogue, alright? So, having said that, I'm going to be signing off. Decent Shirt, signing out.